Hey, Fanboy Nation.
This is your pal Daffy Duck, and you're watching.
We're watching Fanboy.
A fanboy, etc.
Fanboy Nation.
I assume Tom.
This afternoon, I have the honor of speaking with a man who I've been watching his career for God knows how long. And today we are talking about a very heavy film that first premiered at the 2019 Austin Film Festival, and thankfully is finally getting a release date. The Killing of Kenneth Chamberlain, starring Frankie Faison. Mr. Faison, how are you today?
I'm terrific. Thank you for asking.
Listen, this is a very heavy movie, as we had just briefly mentioned before we started the recording. It plays into so much that's going on into modern society, but things that haven't necessarily changed in the past 40, 50 years. I mean, mental health of Vietnam veterans that has been overlooked, the suffering of veterans, racial tensions in the United States. So much that goes into this, and from something that started off as a wellness check, and for it to go the way that it did is just horrifying from a human standpoint.
Absolutely. I mean, this is something that started out with a wellness check where someone is wearing the medical alarm alert system, which is there to save his life, ended up being the thing that caused his death, because they came and the responders, they really had no knowledge of who or how to handle this situation. And it ended up being almost a 2-hour confrontation between 5 or 6 police officers and one elderly ex-Marine, heart trouble, breathing problems, just mental issues. So, and it's a horror. It was a total horror.
I mean, I think the only positive spin that we could put on it is the fortitude of this gentleman with all these medical conditions and his physical training in his youth that kept him alive for the extra 2 hours through this. But everything else is god awful. I mean, I've heard this growing since I was a youth, and you'd hear how veterans were treated, but the fact that this was an elderly person and it happened to him. Had you heard about the story prior to being a part of this, or was it once you got the script and Mr. Morgan Freeman's name was attached to it and so many other people's on the production side that you're like, I have to be this gentleman?
Yeah, it was, I live about 40 minutes away from where this whole thing took place. I'm in New Jersey. He's in White Plains, New York, an hour at the most. Never heard a word about it. And then I got this script about this story, and the guy the writer, David Midell, was telling me that it's based on a true situation. I just fell in love with this script. I mean, even before, or even if I hadn't known that it was based on a real individual, it was such a compelling script that I wanted to do it.
It's a powerful movie, and as you said, even if it wasn't based on a real person, it's still powerful. But what I most appreciate is the level of detail in the storytelling and your presentation of the character, far more than, it's easy to make a big blockbuster when you have $350 million and a special effects team across the globe that'll allow you to tell a story for 3 hours. But when you break it down and humanize somebody like Mr. Chamberlain, were you able to meet with his family, his survivors, and discuss with them a little bit, since you're only roughly an hour away from where this all happened?
We shot it and we filmed it in Chicago, a suburb of Chicago. And no, I had no interaction with anyone in his family, except for his son. Towards the end, near the end of the filming, he came on set, and he was around. But other than that, no, it was all drawn from what David Midell had written in this wonderful script that he wrote, and the sense that I got of who this character was. I trusted him because he had done extensive research, and and even with Kenneth's family, he had done, a lot of research. So I trusted that and was able to come up with this characterization, which I, hope that will move people enough to know that this was a wrong thing to happen, and it should never happen again.
No, it's a story that moved me. I know not too far from my house, there was a homeless veteran in a very similar situation, but a younger man. And I believe his father was in the fire department, and he ended up getting killed by the police as well. And so, it's one of those situations that just, I mean, it's not just East Coast versus West Coast, 25 years ago from the music scene. This is happening across America still to this day. And the reason why I ask about the family is because I'm always concerned how the family is treated in something like this, and that they deserve to be respected in their memorial of the person that they lost. So that's why I asked in that regard. And I'm glad that the writer did as much research as he did in order to tell such a provocative story.
Yes, he did. And, unfortunately, the White Plains, I guess the police and the whoever was in charge, they treated the family pretty badly, and especially his son. His son, who was there, he came up and see his father on a gurney, and he's trying to get some answers, and they tell him to shut up. It's none of his blank F business. And then he goes outside, and he's surrounded by about 10 or 12 officers, and they're just, they're just basically like saying, you need to get the hell out of here, and he stood his ground. He's an amazing young man, Kenneth Chamberlain Jr. And he basically said, what you see here is not someone you can just overwhelm with your physicality and the bullying. You see a man who has a brain, and I'm going to use every ounce of that brain to try to bring justice to my family. And right now, after 10 years, this case is still pending. He just wants accountability. It's not about going out there seeking multi-million-dollar lawsuits. That wouldn't help. Right now, this family wants accountability, and I hope that this film helps to move them closer to that.
I mean, asking for accountability is at the bare minimum. I couldn't imagine people thinking that he was trying to milk this for some sort of financial gain. No matter how much money you get, you're never going to get your father back. Absolutely.
And he's certainly not, I see nothing in his personality or his family's personality that says, look, let's go out there and get some money for this, because it doesn't make any sense. You've lost a loved one, and that's the thing that's important, and that's the thing that you strive to rectify as much as you can, however you can.
I know this is a dramatization and this is a biopic, not a documentary of Mr. Chamberlain. How much more difficult is it to portray a person who really existed and not too long ago that he passed, versus a historical person that's been gone for 100+ years, versus a character that you have to create from the ground up?
Well, I think that in either case, especially if it's someone who's unknown, I mean, if it's a public figure like a president or a king or an emperor or, something like that, someone who's really in the public eye, people get to see him and interact, or not interact, but get to see him on day to day all the time. It's a little bit more difficult. A lot more research would need to be done so you can do the mannerisms and the this and the that of the person. But I think that in this, I had a lot of room to create what I thought would be the right thing. And then luckily for me and for the film, I think I landed in a pretty good place. I know his family really has embraced, the film and my performance and the way I portrayed their father. But I never wanted to do, I didn't want to do an imitation of who Kenneth Chamberlain was. I just wanted to tell his story and let the rest speak for itself.
Yeah. Anything after the family appreciating you representing their father and being pleased with your performance is icing on the cake at that point, in my eyes, just because I care so much about the family and people with loss and grief.
Yeah, and I love the way that you express that, because a lot of times that element is forgotten, but their suffering and their grief, it goes on. It will always be there because they are the ones who are left behind. I mean, it's a terrible thing, and that's what I felt when I read this script, and I felt like this is the kind of work that I want to do, and the kind of work that I enjoy doing, and just bringing real characters to life so that people can learn from them and use them as an example as they go about their daily lives.
That's what I miss about art in the last, I'd say, 10 years, especially artistic expression with film and television. It's become so much of hitting somebody over the head with their message rather than letting the story unfold and slowly opening somebody's eyes to a situation. And this is going, the way the film was made, the way that you portrayed the character, the way it's just written, you feel for them. It's not one of those moments where, and this happened, and you're just like, here we go again, and now it's almost paint by numbers. This is
Right.
a real heart-wrenching film in the traditional sense of the idea of cinema.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why it was such a joy to do, and I feel that it's been very successful in doing that, and I could not be more satisfied or pleased. And it is very painful. It's very painful to watch this film. I mean, I've seen it 5 or 6 times, and each time I see it, because I'm seeing it as a viewing audience member, not as the actor who did the role anymore. And, that's gone. That's over there. And the story moves me. I'm just like, I say, no, this can't be happening. This cannot be happening. And yet it did, and it is. So.
David Midell is the writer and the director of the film, and he's a Chicago native. This is a New York story, even though, as we mentioned, this goes across the entire United States. Did you get to sit down with him and ask him what inspired a native Chicago filmmaker to want to make a movie about a veteran with health issues that lost his life tragically in New York?
Yeah, I mean, many times, because that's what he's been very much involved with health issues, and he's actually has some, he's on the spectrum himself, and so he's very much in touch with that. And his search, your research and just looking for information is the thing that brought him to the Chamberlain case, and he came across that online. Then he called Kenneth Chamberlain, the son, and spoke to them, and he spoke to the family, and he told them he wanted to do their story.
And I'm glad that he told their story, because I would have never heard of this as well. I mean, the story and the situation that wasn't too far from my home, that lasted maybe a week in the news and then disappeared. So to know that it's not just an isolated incident for Mr. Chamberlain or for the person down the street from me, or up the freeway rather, it's heart-wrenching. But when you play a character like this, we continue to grow as human beings, whether we're 5 years old or 50 years old. We always learn something new about ourselves when something like this is presented to us. And in playing this character, what did you rediscover about yourself, or learn about yourself, or a mindset that may have evolved over the years that you held so tightly to?
Well, I'll answer this in about 30 seconds, because my publicist is saying that I have to get on with another call. They schedule these things very tight. But I learned a lot about myself and who I am, and who I am not. And the values that I got from my parents, they stick with me, and they offer me the ability and the capability of being able to tell someone else's story, because I know that I have a lot of compassion and understanding, and this makes me have even more. And to not be not to be judgmental. I've always taken everyone for who they were, and those are the things that resonate with me. So I have to say I really have appreciated the comments that are coming from you and maybe we'll get a chance to talk again, but my person is telling me I gotta go.
God willing, we'll meet face to face one day and be able to chat longer on September 17th in theaters and on demand from Gravitas Ventures, The Killing of Kenneth Chamberlain. Thank you very much, Mr. Frankie Faison. It's been a great pleasure, and I hope to chat with you soon.
Thank you, and thank you for getting the word out about the film. I appreciate it. Thank you.